Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of ITSP Magazine, Secure Your Strategy. And today I have the wonderful guest, Tracy. Tracy, why don't you tell the people who you are?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me back, Chloe. I'm Tracy Maleeff. You may also know me as InfoSec Sherpa, and I am thrilled to be here. And I am currently job hunting, actually, but I previously held roles with GlaxoSmithKline, the New York Times, the Krebs Stamos Group. I've seen a lot of different aspects of our industry, and I come to our industry from library science. So I feel like I have a really unique perspective on all this.
I think that's like one of the things that really stood out when I first met you was the fact that you were into library science before you got into this industry. Because I don't think I've met too many people like that in our industry. And so like when I met with you, it was just like, oh, wow, okay, this is awesome. I have so many questions. But
It always made sense to me. I mean, I knew that I wanted to make a career change. I first looked at tech in general, and I really didn't gel with a lot of those people. I would go to meet tech meetups, and I don't know how it is in other cities, but at least in Philly a couple of years ago, people only wanted to talk to you at networking events if you either had a lot of money to invest or you thought you had the next Facebook idea, basically. And if you didn't fit in either one of those buckets, people would just like heel turn and walk away from you. I'm like, "Oh, I don't like these people very much." But when I found my island of misfit toys of cybersecurity folks and infosec folks, then I knew that I found a home there. But there's definitely a lot of areas of library science that I think can either be applied to InfoSec or, that we can just learn from. And that's a lot of the talks that I do, honestly, including RSA. Next month, I'll be speaking about how to make InfoSec better through library science.
I love that. And I know like one of the things that we were talking a little bit earlier before we start recording was about how our industry could do so much better when it comes to communication. And it feels like people are always asking for advice on how do I do better in communicating my needs? Also, how do I communicate when I'm in the middle of a fire? So everyone, if you're listening, that's what we're going to tackle today. And we may
Yep.
talk about other things because that's just how things go. So Tracy, someone did reach out to you recently and asked for advice. You want to tell us a little bit about the story?
Sure. There's definitely been a lot of questions about communications and at first I want to just kind of divide up when I talk about communications and information security, I feel like there's at least two different ways to look at it. One, how you communicate with your end users. I know a lot of people don't like that term for some reason. So I propose consumers of security because they are consuming your security services. How you talk to the people who consume your security services and how you deal with, say, peers in a tech department within your organization. That's going to be two different methods of communication, really. So I wanted to share a story from a past job, if that's okay,
Oh, yeah.
of how eye-opening it was for me to see how infosec people, not everyone obviously, but how a lot of people in infosec communicate or not communicate. So I was new to this job and they had me tag along to a meeting with the manager of another IT department within the company. And the purpose of the meeting was that this manager wanted our security team to review this open source software that he wanted to put into use in his department. And this was the meeting to give the results. And I noticed how sort of mean they they were to this manager and just telling him no and really just kind of shooting ideas down left and right and really not working with him. And it was starting to bug me, but again, I was new and I didn't really know what I should say. But when the manager from the other department spoke up and said, "Why do I feel like I'm being punished because I asked the security team to review this for me?" That felt like a gut punch, and that's what made me speak up. And so I like to think I kind of took control of the situation, but I just looked at him directly and just said, what's what's the biggest impediment for you to implement the more secure paid version of this software versus this open source that you're talking about? Because just as a backstory, the team had pen tested it and it decided that the open source version didn't meet our security standards. I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to get a bunch of hate letters from open source advocates. It was this one particular situation, it didn't meet the standards. So anywho, and his response was, as you can imagine, was money, right? Well, it costs, nothing for the open source, but and it costs, this amount of money, and it's money. So my first thought was, okay, well, who do we need to speak to, to show our case of, okay, but if we pay for the more secure version, that will be a cost savings in the end, because then in 6 months we won't be dealing with cleaning up an incident, for an example. So long story short, wound up speaking to the person who could approve the money, made the case. They got them set up with the paid version and everything. But think about how that could have gone if I hadn't spoken up, or if he hadn't said that comment about feeling attacked, which then provoked me to jump in. So what would have happened? Maybe just out of desperation or shadow IT, they would have employed the less secure version. That's why I like to tell that story of, how you communicate with people is very impactful. When I first came into InfoSec, I saw a lot of people acting like Eric Cartman from South Park, of respect my authority, and just kind of walking around like a sheriff. A lot of do as I say, not as I do. The same people yelling about, stupid end users are, logging in on a server to check their email or something dumb like that. Like, I just saw a lot of hypocrisy and just a lot of this territorial kind of attitude. And coming from library science, that just didn't sit well with me, because in library science, the patron, the library user, is your focal point, and you don't have a job without that person. So I've been trying to, my years here in InfoSec, I've been trying to relay some of those ideas that, you need to ask questions of things that people didn't say. For example, if somebody's going to, either they're complaining to you about something, or they're coming to you with a problem, say they clicked on a phishing email, listen to what they have to say. You're the expert. Go back and think of, what didn't they say that might help add to this. An example of this is, I had someone at a job contact me that they clicked a phishing email. And I said, okay, let's walk through what all happened here. And the short version of this is, oh, I saw this email. It looked okay. I clicked on it. It asked me for my username and password. I closed the browser and called you. Okay, let's go back. What happened between you opening the browser and you closing it? And that's when they disclosed, because I asked that question specifically, then they told me, oh, well, yeah, it asked me for my login, my username and password, and I put it in, and then the website didn't do anything. So then I closed the browser. Well, all of us in InfoSec should realize what just happened, right? Their credentials got stolen. And why didn't they say that the first time? Maybe they didn't think that was, a good piece of information, because they just don't know, because security is my job and not theirs. Maybe they did think it was kind of suspicious, and maybe they were afraid to say it. So that's the kind of thing. But if you don't go back and ask those questions, if you ask the things that aren't said, You could miss a lot of information, and there's a way to do it with respect.
Yeah.
And, and like I said, when that happened with that person, I just thought, okay, let's just go back one more time. And I don't say things like, what did you do? I'll say, what transpired after that, or what happened after you clicked that? Because it's taking the blame off of them, and you're just trying to fact find. You're trying to be a detective, not a sheriff. So I didn't admonish this person for clicking on the link, just asked all the questions I needed to, handle the situation, and then made it a teachable moment of, here are some signs you could have looked for. So I think more people having an attitude like that, and handling themselves like that, will stop having us being adversaries with the consumers of our security. I think there is too much friction between the people uh, who do security and the people who consume it, because there are too many people who just have a bad attitude, in my opinion.
I think it's a lot about, I've seen this quite a bit with the security folks. It's like shame. It's
Hmm.
like how we communicate to people that are outside our circle. It's like, well, why would you click on that? Why would you fill that out? Did you check the URL? Don't you remember the lessons? Like
Yeah.
that, you don't want to talk like that to someone, because now they're going to feel shame, and now they're not going to get help or tell you if they do something wrong again, right? And I know a lot of people are like, well, shame works because then they won't do it again because they'll feel shameful. And they're like, I
Mhm.
don't think that's really actually the case, because you still want
No.
to keep that channel of communication open. You don't want to be seen as like the jerk in the room who's going to tell you you're terrible, indirectly. And like
And
you're,
yeah.
yeah,
And what shame does is shame prevents them from telling you about it.
yeah.
So the other example I give is it's all about approachability. Would you rather have an end user come to you 5 minutes before lunchtime and say, "Oh, I know I did something wrong. Here's the details," or they don't tell you because they were shamed, and it's 4:59 on a Friday of a holiday weekend, and all of a sudden your alerts start blowing up and your logs are going crazy because a user did something and they were too shamed to tell you about it. I'd rather work through my lunch than have to stay late on a holiday weekend, to try and piece together something I have very little details about, versus someone feeling comfortable enough to approach me and say, "Hey, I did something. I know it was wrong." And I'm like, "Okay, well, let's get through this together. We'll work through this. Tell me the circumstances." If you frame it that way, it kind of starts to get into people's heads of like, "Oh, okay, now like
Mhm.
I'm going to be inconvenienced one way or another because I'm on a
Yeah, it's going to
security team."
happen no matter what,
Yeah,
but
thank you. Like that's what I want people to understand. It's like you're going to be inconvenienced one way or another because this is going to happen. Would you rather have it happen, at lunchtime or, after work?
yeah.
And like think about it that way. So yeah, approachability is a big factor in library science that I've been trying to bring over, to infosec, and I've seen it happen. I've been at jobs where people didn't feel comfortable going to the security team as a whole for whatever reason. A variety of reasons why. They just felt comfortable coming to me directly. And I know for one instance, I was able to avoid a potential security issue with a couple hundred employees, because this one department wanted to all install this certain app that had a lot of privacy concerns when I checked it out. Um, and if they hadn't asked or hadn't come to me directly, who knows what we would have had on our hands. But I'm just grateful that I do practice the approachability, and I want people to come to me. No matter how bad it is, we'll get through it. I just, need your cooperation. And that too, if you make the person feel important and not shamed, of like, okay, help me through this, tell me what you know, things like that. Maybe it's a little bit of psyops, what infosec also likes to play with. Maybe it's a little bit of social engineering, but if it helps you resolve the issue, what harm is there in
Yeah.
that?
You definitely get cases of also people in the security team doing something wrong or clicking on the link. And it's always a good moment to always, if they're already coming to tell you about it, they already know they did something wrong. And it's always good to remind them like, hey, it happens to so many people. well-known people in security will click on something at some point. And it's
Oh,
just
for sure.
good to just like let people know mistakes are going to happen. That's what human, and that's why we have security. It's because security wouldn't happen if humans were perfect in a sense.
Yeah. And it is definitely harder when you start talking about family. Um, because that, I mean, I get it. That's frustrating too when, you talk about security with your family, and then, you only get contacted when somebody's, screaming because they did something terribly wrong. Yeah, that's very frustrating, and I feel that too. But you know what, that's a talk for a different day of dealing with family and security, because that is a whole different ball of wax.
Yeah, exactly. So what kind of advice would you give to, say, for example, security leaders on how they can do better when it comes to communicating with others about security risks? We tend to see this question pop up quite a bit on LinkedIn on what are some best practices.
Well, honestly, I think that people need to be asked what their concerns are first. I think a lot of times we kind of go in with our own agenda for security. Um, if the things that we're saying don't either pertain to those people, or they're not high up on their list, then we're going to sound like Charlie Brown's teacher, to them. They're going to be maybe only just listening for whatever keyword they want to hear. So I would flip the script and, ask folks, what are their biggest, security concerns? And if they say none, well, then that's when you can start going and pick, fine tuning and narrowing in on something. And it also depends on to whom you're speaking. Are you speaking to a C-suite? Are you speaking to the admin assistant pool? Maybe an admin assistant who supports four different executives. Their needs and their threat model is going to be different. So I think that's the first part of communication that leaders need to understand is, do you even know to whom you're speaking? And is your advice tailored to them, or are you just throwing some cookie cutter talk at them that's not going to mean anything? So, and if people don't have communication skills, whether it's a leader or someone who's just a brand new SOC analyst, you know, take an online class or a Udemy, or watch videos. I know a lot of people recommend Toastmasters, and being able to communicate is going to go a long way in security. The number one example I give people, because I feel like this hits home the hardest with them, is I'll say, you never know, sometime in the future, there may be a non-technical CFO, chief financial officer, that's in between you and the budget you want to get approved. And you need to explain to this non-technical CFO why they need to approve this, this amazing budget for you. If you can't articulate that, these technical terms in non-technical ways, added in with like business value and things like that, then you're never going to get your security budget. So there, you have to be so mindful of your audience. And I think that's what people approach communication of coming from themselves, of like, well, what am I going to say? Pause. Who am I talking to first? Who am I speaking to? What are their concerns? Let me speak to their concerns. That's where I think we mess up as humans with communication, is that we think about ourselves first, and we really need to be thinking about to whom we're relaying the message to.
I think what you said earlier about asking further questions is definitely something that I think our industry can practice, because we're always like quick to jump. Okay, I'll tell you what it is. But the reality is you have to find out, maybe the way that they're communicating it is going to give you the opportunity to give them the wrong answer. So asking all these additional questions, I think, is really beneficial before like leaping in to save the day. Take a step back and keep listening. I think that's one of the things I feel like, also what you said earlier about you need to know who you're selling or positioning this product or situation to. Because if you are talking to someone on a security team, like as if you were talking to someone on the marketing team, it should be very different of a conversation, not watered down, not
Exactly. Yeah.
dumbed down, but I mean, like, it will be a very different type of conversation, different verbiage, and way we communicate.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I've definitely heard, uh, InfoSec folks speak with a lot of jargon. I'm not picking on them, but I actually had an instance, not an incident, but an instance recently where a military person we're having a conversation and they just start throwing some acronyms at me. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? And then another military person had to overheard and translated. And that, and again, it wasn't, I mean, maybe if I thought about it, I could have figured it out, but honestly, it was a term I'd never heard before. It was something very military specific. That's how you lose your audience,
Yeah.
and that's how miscommunication happens. So yeah, that using, not using jargon. And yeah, like a lot of people want to think of it as dumbing down, which is also just very arrogant. You're just simplifying. Their job isn't security. So,
Yeah.
you know, and but you can also maybe maybe gauge what their level is, maybe give them the benefit of the doubt. There's that t-shirt that for women at InfoSec conferences of assume she is technical and breathes fire. Uh, you know, unless you ask, maybe just say to the person, "Oh, how comfortable are you with me using more technical terminology?" And then let them make the decision of, "Oh, I don't even know how to turn on a computer," versus, "Oh, no, I'm good. I think, I'll you can speak to me, give it to me straight, technical terms." There is a way you can work that in a conversation if you're not I would say specifically if you're not sure about someone's technical level and that maybe you have to get into some technical concepts, let them tell you, you know,
Yeah.
um, that that's as simple as that and I think most people will probably err on the side of going more simplistic. For the most part, if someone, but you can also kind of tell in someone's eyes if you're using technical term, if they tell you that they understand technical terms, but they look lost, maybe they were just trying to save face. But there's ways. This is why you take some, classes in communication. There are ways then you can change your language to kind of work back into some definitions into the terms and things like that, or saying an acronym, saying the letters of an acronym and then identifying it in the same breath. Just, real, it's like, oh, these rats, these remote access Trojans. You just kind of say it all together so you're not making someone feel dumb. You're just saying it all in one breath, like as if to you it's all one thing.
I think it's also really good to do that, especially with neurodivergent. Like, you don't know who's in your audience. And so acronyms can be seen as different things. So for example, an acronym used on, let's say, sales is going to be different from some acronyms you use in
Oh,
security. And then developers have their own acronyms, but also there's so many acronyms in the first place in our industry. And so, yeah, people are going to forget what it stands for, or they'll be like, and what do you mean by that acronym? Can you please, share a little bit more, break it down so I want to be on the same page as you. And I have come to experience where I did have something like that happen in the past. And then someone's like, really, you don't know what that is, that acronym? And then they they mansplain, like
yeah.
it's not, I mean, it's not even a mansplain thing, but you'll have people that will like, really, you don't know what that is? Let my ego tell you about this thing. And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, well, I'm just pointing it out because that means something very different if you talk to a different person on a security team.
Yeah, I was going to say there's so many areas within information security, which is an umbrella term, that, yeah, the same acronyms could mean something wildly different. A funny misunderstanding with acronyms is SLA, which to a lot of people in tech or in InfoSec means service level agreement. Well, in library world, for me, it meant Special Libraries Association. It was the professional association I was involved with for many years. And to that point, I remember one of the last meetings I was in as a librarian. We were talking to a sales rep about a certain software, and this sales rep mentioned something about SLA. And my boss, of all people at the table, said, "What does the Special Libraries Association have to do with this?" And I was like, in this instance, it means service level agreement because of context. And she said, and then she said to me, well, how did you know that? I'm like, context clues, but okay. Um, yeah, so it's a wildly different thing, and it really caused confusion in the meeting because that person was speaking tech, and two librarians who, like are all except for me were familiar with the other meaning of SLA. And I don't think it's any coincidence that that was on when I was on my way out of library world, and I had already kind of been steeped in tech for about a year or so, exploring. So, but if I hadn't, I think it probably would have been kind of foreign for me. So, yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Acronyms mean different things to different people. Um, you know, I just feel like you need to have a more positive attitude with this, and I know that's hard for for some people. Oh, the other thing I was going to mention, and you touched upon it, I do have to admit I don't really know a lot about giving tips for neurodivergent folks, and that's something I'm happy to learn more about because I know what sort of tips I have that work for me, which do involve a lot of reading body language and things like that, which it has been expressed to me. Well, not everybody can pick up on that. So I admit that I don't know how to translate my tips for neurodivergent folks. If people want to teach me, that'll be great because I want everyone to be able to have these same tips and skills to succeed. But yeah, I just wanted to have a mea culpa of I understand as I'm saying these things in the back of my head, I realize that not everyone can pick up on the mood of a room. But so I'll just put it this way, if you can tap into that and then redirect your talk. A lot of times I've been giving security awareness talks and you realize things are falling flat, you see looks of confusion, you just change it up as you go.
Yeah, and a good tip for that, what you can do is also contact the conference and ask them what are the demographics of usually the people that attend, and especially for your talk. So then you can be prepared to have, the demographics in your mind when you're giving that presentation. It is very hard to read a room for some. And so that's one way how to go about it. Or you can have one of your friends be in the audience or get in the room before and try to give you an idea what to expect. Or you could do hand raising. So you could be like, how many of you guys are CISOs? Now raise your hand. How many of you guys are analysts? How many of you guys are brand new to security? And that can also help you read the room of or if you're all saying, right? Is everyone having a good day? Raise your hand. Or if you're burned out, raise your hand. Like it gives you, first of all, it's going to wake up your audience beforehand too. So that's the tip I've learned.
Yeah, doing some sort of audience engagement is great. Asking questions is great. I definitely like to do that. I have this one technique, depending on the audience I'm giving it to. It's usually for people not in the industry. I don't want to give away what the phrase is, but I have this certain phrase that I have people do hand motions with it and say something. It's basically a stress reliever because I'm giving this talk to non-technical folks about all these really scary security topics. So I will periodically through the talk offer this little stress relief. And then it makes people laugh and feel comfortable. Yeah, so I mean that's definitely something that people can work on are these communication skills, written, and verbal. And I think that managers or any higher ups, I think people appreciate, the truth and appreciate honesty. And, if the budget wasn't approved for some reason and we can't get certain tools, you know, you I always learned as a law firm librarian, you can take away as long as you also give something. So if you have to explain to someone that, the new budget wasn't approved and we can't get this fancy, shiny security toy, the security blinky box, maybe put the bad news first, but then follow it up with, okay, but I did some research and here's a list of comparable tools that we can still utilize. Um, and do this for your end users too. You're like, no, we can't have you going to this, gaming website or something like that, but maybe offer them knowledge of, oh, well, I know the nearby supermarket has an open Wi-Fi that probably won't block that gambling website for you. That's probably a horrible example, but um, just trying to illustrate the point of, if you do have to say no to someone, it lessens the blow of disappointment or upsetment if you can offer something to them instead, a reasonable facsimile. An example of that was one time when I was a librarian. I noticed that this one book that 10 of our attorneys had was this $1,000 book. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to go to the shelf of our library because I want to see what $1,000 book looks like. And I'm thumbing through it. And because of my experience, I'm realizing, oh, 3/4 of this book is free online because it's government material. 1/4 of this book was proprietary. Long story short, I was able to craft these instructions of, here's how you can get 3/4 of that book for free online by doing these steps. And for the other part of the book, I found this $100 replacement that's the same as isn't here. May I cancel this $1,000 book? And all of the attorneys were unanimous, were because nobody told them. And then they felt upset that this $1,000 book was being attached to them. But yeah, no one had ever noticed or realized this. And so, yeah, but I guarantee you, if I had just gone up to them and say, I'm going to cancel this $1,000 book for you, they would have fought for me. But when I approached it as, we're getting grossly overcharged for something that is mostly free. And then when I phrased it that way, oh, okay, yeah, get my name, take my name off of that, get rid of it. That I can't believe that happened. It's all on how you phrase things. So yeah, you can take away and do it nicely and still give someone, a tool to use instead.
Well, I love all these suggestions, and I'm sure our listeners are going to love it as well. Tracy, it was lovely to have you on here.
Yes.
We'll have to get you back on here in the future, and I'll see you at RSA conference.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'm InfoSec Sherpa on Twitter, and I have other links there. But yeah, I am job hunting, and I'd love to talk with you with some folks, and I'd love to be on again. So we'll have to set that up.
Sounds good. All right, take care, everyone. We'll see you soon.
All right.
We hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you learned something new and this story made you think, then share ITSP Magazine with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our columns. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.